What's up guys, my name is Ace, and yesterday we got one of the biggest patches we've seen since launch for Call of Duty World War II. I've already covered the patch to the sprint out and aim down sight times. I will leave a link to that video in the description below, but today we're going to be going over all of the other weapon changes that were made with this patch. And there are quite a few of them. Things have been mixed up quite a bit, and there's a lot of guns that weren't really that great before that are now suddenly very viable to use. So let's first hop into it here with the MP-40. The MP-40 got a buff to its recoil. And looking at the side-by-side here, it's very clear that it has a lot less horizontal recoil. Pre-patch, it would often kick very strong to the right while also kicking pretty strong upwards. Now it mainly just kicks upwards. It does have a little bit of a right-leaning recoil, but it's very slight, and this means it's extremely easy to control now. All you have to do is pull down slightly on your right analog stick, and you'll be right on target. And I've been finding that I can use this comfortably up to medium ranges. So the MP-40, in my mind, is actually one of the top tier SMGs after this patch. Next up, we have the FG42. Now, the FG42 has been all over the place. First, they nerfed the fire rate, then they buffed it again, and now they've once again nerfed the fire rate, this time more than ever. Before this patch, the FG42 was firing at about 455 rounds per minute. They've nerfed that down to 425 rounds per minute now, so it's noticeably slower, and this means the time to kill is no longer really highly competitive with a lot of the other rifles. Also, when you look at the side-by-side here, you can see that recoil generally hasn't changed. I got a little bit of a strange recoil pattern on one of them, but that would happen pre-patch sometimes as well. Generally, it's pretty much just as accurate as it was before, but it now has a slower time to kill. Now, this change is something that I don't agree with at all. I think it was a response to the competitive community. They really didn't like the FG42 after the last buff to it. And I also think the fact that they buffed the sprint out and aim down sight times for the SMGs, that already effectively nerfed all of the rifles in this game, so I don't feel like this change was also necessary on top of all of that. But I'd like to know what you guys think about that in the comments down below. Next up, a change that I've been waiting for since launch. This is with the SVT-40, and it got a recoil buff. This is exactly what I've been asking for. In its pre-patch state, there was really no reason to use the SVT-40 over the M1 Garand. They had pretty much the same accuracy, but the SVT-40 fired at a slower fire rate and therefore had a slower time to kill. They had the same ranges and everything as well. So there was really no upside to using the SVT over the M1 Garand. Now they've made it so the center speed seems to be noticeably faster on the SVT-40, and this means that your recoil doesn't get out of control when you fire multiple shots. Pre-patch using the SVT-40 was a bit of a struggle because you had to wait between shots. You couldn't just spam it at the maximum fire rate, which like I said is already quite low. Now you can kind of spam it at that max fire rate and still stay somewhat on target. It might get away from you sometimes. It's not perfectly accurate like the M1A1 or the Gewehr, but it is very noticeably more accurate than it was pre-patch. So if you haven't given it a go yet, make sure you do that. Now with this buff also came a slight nerf to the SVT-40. They basically just increased the hipfire spread so it now matches the M1 Garand. It used to have a slightly tighter hipfire spread, and I think this is a totally fair change. This rifle is obviously designed to be more of a longer range, precision type weapon, and now it actually fills that role. Next up is an update that created one of my new favorite guns. This is the M1A1 Carbine. What they did with this one is they increased the fire rate by a very noticeable amount. Now, of course, you do have to have a decent trigger finger if you want to take advantage of this. Having said that, it's still not as fast as some of the previous Call of Duty game semi-autos that we've seen, like in World at War or even like Black Ops 2 FAL. It's not quite up to that level when it comes to fire rate, but it is noticeably faster, and the M1A1 now has a slightly more competitive time to kill. It's still going to be slower than a lot of the other rifles in the game, so it's not like it's suddenly dominating everything. But the time to kill is much more competitive, and it still maintains that pinpoint accuracy. Next up, the Gewehr got a buff as well. First off, the patch notes listed the Gewehr as getting a faster fire rate. Based on my hand testing, this difference seems to be pretty much negligible. And it is possible that maybe it's my trigger finger, but generally I can easily shoot to the fire rate cap of this pre-patch, and it seems like I'm shooting to the fire rate cap post-patch as well, and I'm not seeing any noticeable change here to the fire rate. So as far as the fire rate buff to the Gewehr, you're probably not going to notice much at all, but they also added 2 rounds in the magazine, so it's now 12-round magazine standard instead of 10 rounds, and they made it slightly more accurate, so it's a little bit more in line with the M1A1 Carbine. Pre-patch, it was already pretty accurate, but it did have a little bit of vertical recoil. Now they pretty much eliminated that vertical recoil, and it just keeps a nice tight spread. Next up, we have a nerf to the M1903 Springfield, as well as the Kar98K. For both of these rifles, they reduced the aim down sight time by approximately 2 frames. Now 2 frames might sound really insignificant, but when it comes to quickscoping, those 2 frames do make a pretty noticeable difference. So quickscoping with the M1903 as well as the Kar 98 has been nerfed once again, and it seems like Sledgehammer really wants to make these more of the traditional snipers where you sit back and you pick people off by hardscoping rather than running around quickscoping, and they really want the Lee Enfield to be the quickscoping sniper rifle, which I'm kind of okay with because the Lee Enfield requires you to be quite accurate. You have to hit them just in the chest. If you hit a shoulder or an arm, you get a hit marker and you won't get a kill. So personally, I feel like this wasn't a bad change, but at the same time, I don't feel like it was a super necessary change. And that's coming from somebody that doesn't really quickscope often. I felt after that last Kar 98 nerf, the snipers were in an okay place. But at the same time, if it means I'm going to get quickscope less, then I'm all for it. So finally in this patch, we have shotguns. 2 of the shotguns were adjusted. The first one is the toggle action, and the toggle action got 2 extra shells in the magazine, so instead of 6, you now have 8, and I think that was an excellent change because you really rarely saw toggle actions in the game, or at least I basically never saw toggle actions used. And part of the reason is it often takes like 3 shots to kill an enemy, and you only have 6 shots in a magazine, so if you run into like 2 to 3 enemies, you're often going to be finding yourself in a lot of trouble. So the extra 2 shells actually helps quite a bit without making the shotgun instantly overpowered or anything. And also, they nerfed the aim down sight spread. Before this patch, when you aim down sight with the toggle action, you had a very tight aim down sight spread, which doesn't really make too much sense for a semi-auto. So they did nerf that a little bit, and this is the difference that you can see right here. So it was quite a noticeable nerf. It seems like they pretty much doubled the aim down sight spread, and this seems like an appropriate start to buffing this shotgun to where it should be. I don't want them to go overboard with this and make it like a Brecci 2.0, but at the same time, I feel like it needed a little bit of love. So finally, we have the M30 Luftwaffe Drilling. For this one, first up, we have pretty much the reverse to what happened with the toggle action when it comes to our aim down sight spread. Pre-patch, as you can see here, we had a decent spread when you aim down sight. Like, it would tighten up quite a bit, but not super tight. And as you can see post-patch, it is super tight when you aim down sight. And this, combined with the next buff to it that we're going to be talking about in a second here, turns this gun pretty much into the Argus from Black Ops 3. When you aim down sight, your spread tightens up so much that it's almost as if you're firing a slug. Obviously, you're not unless you're using rifle bullet, but it tightens up very significantly, and I would highly recommend aiming down sight in every situation with this shotgun. And this brings us to the next big buff to this, and this is very noticeable here. This was a buff to its damage and its ranges. So from launch up until this point, this is what the M30 looked like. It took 7 pellets to kill, even at point blank range, out to 5 meters, and then from 5 to 10 meters, it took all 8 pellets in a shot to get a 1-shot kill. And then beyond that, it would take 2 or more shots to kill, up to 5 actually, but that would be really rare. Usually it would be like 2 to 3 shots to kill from 10 meters to 15 meters, and then beyond 15 meters, you wouldn't get a hit marker at all, just like with all the other shotguns. Now let's have a look at post-patch, and as you can see here, a massive change to how this works. Now from that 0 to 5 meter range, it only takes 3 pellets to kill, so it's going to be much more consistent in those really close range situations. Then from that 5 meters all the way out to approximately 18 meters, as long as you're hitting all your pellets or nearly all of your pellets, I can't really tell based on hand testing if it's 7 or 8 pellets. We're just going to say if you hit all of your pellets out to 18 meters, you can get a 1-shot kill. And when you think about the fact that they tightened up the ADS spread significantly, this basically just became the Argus from Black Ops 3, but the big downside is it's still only a double barrel and you have to reload every 2 shots. But overall, this was an incredible change in my mind. Pre-patch, the Luftwaffe didn't really seem to have much of a place. Like, it was nice when you aim down sight. Sometimes you get some pretty long-range kills with it compared to other shotguns, but it didn't really stand out in any way, and it didn't really seem to have much of a place in the game. Now, it's a very unique shotgun. It's really similar to the Argus, like I said, so if you really like the Argus in Black Ops 3, you're probably going to have a great time with this one. Just make sure you're aiming down sight in every single situation that you can, unless you're basically touching your enemy. And this shotgun is so much fun to use after this patch. And with that, that's all of the changes that were made with this patch. A lot of changes. Like I said though, I didn't cover the sprint out and aim down sight changes, and there was a ton of those changes. If you guys haven't seen that one, once again, I will leave that link in the description below. Make sure you check that out because that does affect some of this other balancing as well. And with that, I'd like to know in the comment section below, what do you guys think of all these changes? Do you agree with them? Do you disagree with any of them? And are there any more changes that you want to see in the future? In my opinion, this has been the best patch that we've seen in this game so far since launch. So many of the guns that were simply lower tier before this update are now suddenly very viable, very usable. The sprint out changes were huge. This absolutely changes the pace of the game. I've already noticed quite a bit. People are playing more aggressively. and you have more tools available to counter those campers, and I am loving this change. For anybody that still watches my videos, I know there's a lot of people out there that watch my videos even though they don't really play the game anymore. If you guys haven't come back and tried the game out, make sure you do it now that we have this update. You might find yourself suddenly enjoying the game. If you enjoyed the video, a like rating is always appreciated, and don't forget to subscribe for more if you haven't already. I'll talk to you guys next time.